Well, joining us now is Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council. Tony, welcome back to Faith Nation. You wrote an article about this called "A School Horror Story That Did Not Fit the Narrative." Tony, can you explain what you meant by that?
Certainly. First off, Loudoun County is Exhibit A in what is wrong with our public schools, where the welfare, the safety of children being pushed to the back of the bus. So wokeism, this liberal ideology, and this radical sexual policy can be pushed onto our schools.
So, you all know me. I am a strong hater of conservative media because it lies. Right?
Yeah.
And so before we go into this story, I just want everyone to be aware that trigger warning for sexual assault and transphobia. Cool? Cool. Mom of Virginia teen convicted of sexual assault says he does not identify as female despite wearing a skirt. So this is an ongoing case in Virginia, and it's very complicated, and we're still trying to get all the data points together, but I wanted to share this with you guys because the hits just keep on coming with transphobes, right? So the alleged perpetrator is a 15-year-old boy who was found guilty of sexually assaulting a female classmate, according to Post. We'll cover that in a little bit. And the mom is very clear, doesn't identify as female. Now, the problem is that a lot of right-wing media has tried to frame this person as being a trans woman and using this to feed into the whole old narrative of trans women are going to run their way into the bathrooms and just do naughty stuff because apparently assault isn't already illegal. The interesting thing about this story is it kind of proves the way that right-leaning media attempts to frame things. And what's interesting about this particular variation is that it does report that this kid doesn't identify this way. I think this is what mom said. He's a 15-year-old boy that wanted to have naughties in the bathroom with somebody that was willing, the mother who asked not to be identified to protect her underage son. And they're twisting this just enough to make it a political hot-button issue. The assault, which occurred in a female bathroom at Stonebridge High School in May, ignited a political firestorm after the victim's father was arrested during a volatile school board meeting earlier that year. Claimed his daughter had been attacked, etc. Now, we'll get back to that in a little bit because I think that there's some evidence about this that isn't entirely true. We'll get to that in a minute. I think specifically where the assault happened. However, that policy was adopted months after the May assault. What was this policy? Did I miss it? Smith claimed his daughter went to a girl's bathroom when a boy wearing a skirt sparked backlash against a policy. Okay, policy for people to go in the bathroom for their gender identity. Okay, fair. Not fair that they're trying to take that away. That policy should be implemented. But that policy was adopted months after the May assault. Makes sense. Smith's arrest was cited by the National School Boards Association in a letter to the White House as an example of an immediate threat that is equivalent to a form of domestic terrorism and hate crime. Okay. The boy's mother told Daily Mail that despite his androgynous style and declarations that he's pansexual, her son was just trying to find himself, and that involved all kinds of styles. I believe he was doing it because he wanted to get attention. He desperately needed and sought. She insisted her son didn't wear a skirt as a disguise to slip into a girl's bathroom, saying he would wear a skirt one day and then wear next day jeans, yada yada. Mom acknowledges that her boy is deeply troubled, etc. Been having problems since 5th grade, including sending nude photos of himself to girls. Not great, not a fan. So, found sufficient evidence to sustain charges that the teen, I'm not going to read that out loud, but nevertheless committed sexual assault. The ruling was a juvenile court equivalent of a conviction for the boy who was not identified because of his age. So, following the May attack, that the teen had been transferred to another school where he was accused of another sexual assault by a different 15-year-old girl. Holy shit. He is due back in court. Damn. Okay. So, notice the way they started this off. This wasn't just about a story about a predator. And if he was convicted, I'm going to say at least in one case, and he's alleged in another. What they're talking about here is the post for once in their life might be actually being honest. I know, hard to understand. I know it's shocking, difficult even. But from what I can gather, what we're looking at is this. Right-wing media is trying to frame this as a trans woman going into a bathroom and sexually assaulting a girl. My understanding is that there is an added level of point here that I've not been able to corroborate, but the idea being is that this boy knew this girl, and so there might be a personal issue to it. And also, this kid is not transgender. But yet the right-wing media is jumping on this because it's literally a turf sweat dream, right?
Yeah. Well, and they are very, conservatives are very, very happy to use, I don't want to say this, stories like this instead of actually looking at, the data and what we know around sexual assault, which is that it's overwhelmingly done by somebody the victim knows. There's all sorts of other things. This is something about, power and control. And no, they absolutely want to just shift that stuff away and make it about
trans people,
which doesn't help us at all. And it's really irritating when they do it.
Well, and here's the thing is it's a dual issue, right? Because not only are they trying to use this as a distraction, saying this is a trans kid, which it is not. And if this was a trans person, I still wouldn't stand for them doing anything like this anyway, but their transness is almost irrelevant, as this situation proves that anyone could walk into the bathroom and do something like this. So again, this is why we say assault is already illegal. Why is there specifically this thing there unless it's to cause suffering, right? The suffering is the point.
Mm-hmm.
But it does go a little bit further. So Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times wrote an opinion piece saying the right's big lie about a sexual assault in Virginia. So let's listen to this stuff. Tell me if you guys can hear this, and let's get going.
This is a story about how the right twisted the sexual assault of a teenager into a culture war fantasy.
It's very loud.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how a distorted tale on a conservative website became grist for a nationwide moral panic.
I really wish it would actually use the voice I have picked. That's weird. So, I gotta figure out why it's doing that. So, anywho, we'll just make our way through it. So, go.
On June 22nd,
There we
a
go.
middle-aged plumber named Scott Smith was dragged, lip bleeding and hands cuffed behind his back, from a raucous school board meeting in Loudoun County, VA. According to the local newspaper Loudoun Now, he'd been swearing loudly at another parent and leaning toward her with a clenched fist when the police tackled him and pulled him outside. He'd eventually be convicted of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest and given a suspended 10-day jail sentence.
So Smith in this case, I believe, is the father of the daughter. And I think the thing here is that this starts getting really weird.
Smith's image quickly went viral as a symbol of the sort of school board strife breaking out all over America. The National School Boards Association, writing to President Biden to request help dealing with the growing number of threats of violence and acts of intimidation directed at school board members, included Smith's arrest in a list of examples. Soon, however, Smith revealed why he'd been so distraught. In an interview with the Daily Wire, a website co-founded by the conservative wunderkind Ben Shapiro, Smith said that his 9th-grade daughter had been sexually assaulted in a school bathroom by a boy wearing a skirt. Smith was opposed to a proposed policy allowing trans kids to use bathrooms aligned with their gender identities, believing it made girls like his daughter vulnerable.
Okay, so it sounds like, first off, the Post got the first part right, that this happened at a school board meeting. That's okay. This seems like we're getting at least Again, the post being truthful is really weird, but go off. But so this guy gets an interview with the Daily Wire. Wonder why they chose this specific father of a specific, what this interview with this specific father with this specific situation, right? They heard dress and they were like, oh God.
Now's our time.
So, yeah, now's my time. So, by the way, I love that this article calls it Ben Shapiro Wonderkin. He looks like the grown-up version of the kid from the Munsters. And so what this father did, who is a transphobe, was arguing against having this trans inclusive policy of people using the bathroom connected to their gender identity for fear that it would create other situations like what happened to his daughter. But you guys all realize that that's really fucked, right? Like, that doesn't actually make any sense. Because one, this kid identified as a boy and walked in there anyway. And not only did it once, but also potentially allegedly assaulted another person. So to say that this situation is being mutated by that is really odd. And yes, I know the policy was not effective in that time. And he also did not under the guise of being trans. Thank you, Tiamat. So the point being is that you guys got to understand this. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Let's keep going.
The point is kids are using it as an advantage to get into the bathrooms, he told the reporter, Luke Rosiak. By the time Smith spoke to Rosiak, the story had become even uglier. In July, the boy was arrested in the attack on Smith's daughter and charged with 2 counts of forcible sodomy. But pending a hearing, he was allowed to enroll at another high school while wearing an ankle monitor. In early October he was arrested again, this time for allegedly forcing a girl into an empty classroom and touching her inappropriately.
So, I apologize if this is triggering for anyone, but I really wanted to paint a picture, like, in the sense that not what this kid did, that's fucked up, but in the sense of, like, this kid being, the idea that you're trying to frame this kid as being trans, no, it sounds like this kid is disturbed. I'm not trying to defend what he did. What he did was awful and monstrous, but it sounds like this kid is, like, legitimately, like, ill. And it sounds like, again, this is going to get contentious, but I will say this. In some variations, when I worked as a case manager, when you see really extreme versions of certain types of mental illness, you will see non-conforming behavior that has nothing to do with identity. It has everything to do with essentially the person's internal reality is breaking down. You can see this with schizophrenia, with schizoaffective. I would see this a lot where people would, like, wear either too much clothing or not enough clothing, or they would wear clothing that was just worn in a way that wasn't actually appropriate. Like, it was a lot of stuff like that. And it was very clear that this wasn't an identity-based thing. It was just, they didn't get it at some level, if that makes any sense. So, again, this kid sounds like, he's off.
After Rosiak's article came out, Smith became a symbol of a different kind, a blue-collar martyr to wokeness. Appearing on Tucker Carlson's Fox News show, Rosiak said, "This story is one of the most disturbing I've ever worked on. It raises the possibility that the Loudoun County Public Schools covered up the rape of a 14-year-old girl at the hands of a boy wearing a skirt in order to pass a school policy that Democrats were adamant about passing.
Fuck you, Tucker."
As a result of that cover-up, Rosiak said, a second girl was allegedly attacked, and to prevent all of this from coming out potentially, they arrested the father of the victim. Not surprisingly, the story ricocheted around the right. Conservatives have long argued that letting trans girls and women into women's bathrooms would lead to sexual predation, and now that seemed to have happened. They've argued that wokeness is a form of tyranny, and in Smith they had a man who seemed to have been tyrannized because his family's lived experience posed a threat to trans ideology.
Right? So, like, yeah, keyword there, Seam. Seam is doing a lot of work here. Like, So right here, and just based on the story we have, this is so poised to be a conservative talking point. It is set up in a way to frame this kid as being a trans girl, which he does not identify as, and then loading the discussion, gender ideology, trans ideology, gender ideology, it's turf dog whistles. It might as well be the JQ, right? So
Yeah.
this man who clearly is, being weaponized by the right, and who is transphobic himself, like the idea that he can't see the difference between the kid who was clearly disturbed doing this and the idea that this was not a trans, like,
that the skirt was not the part that was actually important in this situation.
Yeah.
Like, the piece of clothing does not matter here. Clothing is never the issue. There is no, like, hey, you should have just been, wearing more clothing, or you should have been wearing something revealing when you go out at night. No, that's not. If somebody's doing an assault, that shit doesn't fucking matter to them. They're doing an assault.
Yeah, like, no one asked the question during the second alleged assault. Was he wearing a skirt then? I'm just asking.
Right.
Like, was he wearing a skirt then? Because if he was, okay, but if he wasn't, like, doesn't that kind of blow apart your whole trans argument? Like, moving on.
If they had it all wrong, it's almost hard to blame them. The narrative was too irresistible. Outrage over the assaults has loomed over the Virginia gubernatorial race, where the Republican candidate, Glenn Youngkin, has sought to harness parental anger toward school boards accused of putting left-wing dogma above student welfare. Senate Republicans recently harped on the case in a hearing for an appeals court nominee, Holly Thomas. On Wednesday, Senator Tom Cotton badgered Attorney General Merrick Garland about it, indignant about steps the Justice Department is taking to address threats to school board members. Smith's daughter, said Cotton, was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would interfere with their transgender policy during Pride Month.
So my understanding is that that's not what happened. They weren't covering it up. They were doing an investigation. Now, one can make an argument that investigation should have been more open, but yeah, let's keep digging into this, because I want to know where
this. To some degree, I'm not entirely sure what the school board can do while it's under, like, an investigation by.
Yeah, like, all they can do is try to contain it, right? Like, what are they supposed to do? Handcuff the kid? Like, I don't understand what they were supposed to do. Like, I guess they could expel the kid, but then it's out of their hands, so that gets weird. And the kid got moved to another school, so it's like.
Yeah, so this particular school didn't even have that choice, because the court allowed going to a different school.
Yeah. Also, the argument could have been made that moving the kid to another school rather than suspending him entirely was pretty questionable. Sure, and that might have been offsetting them, but I don't think that necessarily means. See, the problem is that, yes, it's true that this could have been pretty scummy on the part of the school board, but not because of pride. The problem is the logic leap, that this has to do with their pride or about trans people. This has to do with a disturbed kid.
Well, and this is part of the goal, right? This is how
the right frame shit.
Yeah. The point is to have misleading stuff like this, to get you onto another topic or another target, instead of actually talking about the parts of this case that matter, that should actually have things done about them.
I misread you, Tiamat. Let me see what you said. Also, the argument could be made that moving the kid to another school rather than suspending him was entirely was pretty questionable. I don't know what are you referring to, another argument or something else? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Tiamat.
Yeah.
How did I misread you?
No, I think I said that, where that was the decision of, like, the judge or the court and not the school. That was getting framed a little weirdly, I think, in the article. Yeah,
that wasn't. I don't know what I misframed. I don't know. But
Bhuta Bibarach, the Commonwealth attorney who prosecuted Smith, received death threats. So did members of the school board. But this week, during a juvenile court hearing, a fuller picture of Smith's daughter's ordeal emerged. She suffered something atrocious. It had nothing at all to do, however, with trans bathroom policies. Instead, like many women and girls, she was a victim of relationship violence.
Okay, so this gets more complicated. this was relationship violence, which is, by the way, very common and not good.
Smith's daughter testified that she'd previously had 2 consensual sexual encounters with her attacker in the school bathroom. On the day of her assault, they'd agreed to meet up again. The evidence was that the girl chose that bathroom, but her intent was to talk to him, not to engage in sexual relations, Biberach, whose office prosecuted the case, told me. The boy, however, expected sex and refused to accept the girl's refusal. As the Washington Post reported, she testified, "He flipped me over. I was on the ground and couldn't move and he sexually assaulted me." The boy was indeed wearing a skirt, but that skirt didn't authorize him to use the girl's bathroom. As Amanda Turkle reported in HuffPost, the school district's trans-inclusive bathroom policies were approved only in August, more than 2 months after the assault. "This was not," said Biberach, "someone identifying as transgender and going into the girl's bathroom under the guise of that."
So this was a very real issue of relationship violence, that this girl wanted to talk and this kid took it too far and again, I guess because it's been prosecuted, sexually assaulted her. This has nothing to do with gender identity. And again, anyone who's actually worked with trans kids, you know this, right? Like, you literally know this. Trans kids, when they come out at school, this is usually shared with all of their teachers. There may even be an IEP about this. Like, there's a number of ways that this kid is sort of seen and sort of out. And so the idea that this kid just suddenly one day pretended to be trans and just wandered in there doesn't make any sense. The idea that they're suddenly trying to frame this kid as trans is just, it's not even a good lie. Because a kid who was genuinely trans coming out would have been known to the school and would have been genuinely putting more effort in than just wearing a skirt. Like,
And also trans kids are at a much, much higher risk, for any kind of violence.
yeah, and again, I see what chat's saying. Like, again, like heteronormativity, relationships are expected. Yeah, so because they make up the ghost story of trans people doing this, they completely ignore the fact that relationship stuff happens, and man, do conservatives like pushing rape culture, right?
Yup.
Let's move on.
On Monday, the boy received the juvenile court equivalent of a guilty verdict. The case dealing with the second attack he is accused of will be decided in November. We don't know exactly why the boy was allowed to attend a different school after his first arrest.
It's a good question.
The district has refused to comment on the transfer because of state and federal privacy laws.
Convenient.
According to Biberach, under state law, juveniles can be detained for only 21 days without a hearing, and her office needed more time than that to get DNA results. A condition of the boy's release was that he could have no contact with the girl, so he couldn't return to his original school.
Yeah. So this gets into, it sounds like his school dropped the ball, but maybe I'm misreading it.
It's not clear whether the school system had the option of barring the boy from in-person school altogether. In a statement this month, the Loudoun County Public Schools Superintendent, Scott Ziegler, called for policy changes that would allow administrators to separate alleged offenders from the general student body. Conservatives, of course, have traditionally opposed policies that would keep accused offenders out of school. As Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump's Secretary of Education, said last year, too many students have lost access to their education because their school inadequately responded when a student filed a complaint of sexual harassment or sexual assault.
Those poor rapists. How dare... You know what? Just because they committed a terrible crime, one of the most horrible crimes that can be done to another human being, why should they lose their education? Now, granted, I want to be really clear. Oh yeah, she tried to silence victims, full stop. But I want to be really clear about this, is like, this channel is very big into the idea of, rehabilitative justice. We do not like retributive justice. I think this kid needs help. very real psychological help. I know there's a direct urge to always, whenever we see some sort of assault or thing, to want to go into a violent rage. I have that urge too, but I want to, as we'll talk about in another segment tonight, always kind of come from a place of what are our values. And for me, the value is this kid needs help and might not be safe to be in public again. But the idea is that to just let these kids, especially a kid who's clearly that disturbed, wander around the old school around his victim, like the psychological harm, like, holy crap.
Even as the facts of this case have come out, the damage done by all the disinformation about it will be hard to undo. Once the politics are over, we're still dealing with the destruction, said Bibaraj, who wonders how her community is supposed to heal.
Not well.
You can't always successfully bring people back to say, I know this is what you were told, but look what happened in court under oath. A sad and complicated truth is probably no match for an exquisitely useful lie.
True.
No, that's super telling.
So what we can take from this is a couple things. This is a thing that came up from Blocked and Reported. Just a very side note thing. Basically, initially the Daily Wire's thing said this happened in, I guess, court, when actually it happened at the school board. They had gotten that wrong and lied about it. The fact is guys, is like, I just need you to understand, right-wing media is very, very easy to throw kids under the bus or throw anyone under the bus to fulfill their narrative. They don't want to talk about rape culture or the way in which this stuff negatively impacts trans women, cis women, or anyone for that matter. You know, I don't want to leave anybody out of that, but specifically more so cis women and trans women are both negatively impacted in these ways. And I think in a lot of ways, one of the things to be very clear about is that I feel like we need to understand that anytime you see these stories, you have to fucking question them. You have to. This is the same as the We Spa incident. The We Spa incident was framed in a whole bunch of misinformation by right-leaning media to try to make it the evil trans predator being in there with women and girls, when in reality what it was is basically right-leaning media picking on a homeless trans woman who is a sex worker and who had plead down most likely a prostitution charge into an indecent exposure charge and was on the list but no longer is. Like, this is the thing. Always question.
Yep.
The fact that the Post got this right is mind-boggling, but I'll give them their really tainted and rusted gold star for the day. But the fact is like, you have to question this stuff. You just have to. Anytime trans rights are involved, you have to question it, because conservatives have to lie to get their points across. We don't.
Yeah. That is true.